Good morning, everyone.
Good
Good
morning,
morning,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah Shabbos, Perek Yud, Chapter 10, Mishnah Vav, Mishnah 6. I'd like to dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother, Mr. Shalom, Mr. Binowitz, Shalom Esmas Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. Our learning should be a schus for her neshama. Okay, Hanoitel Tzipanav Zu Bezu. If somebody removes his fingernails by pulling one with the other, he's not using a clipper, he's not using a scissor, he's basically, taking his hand and pulling it off. Or he uses his teeth. Okay. Now let's say he uses his hand to pull out hair from his head. From his mustache. The same thing regarding his beard. Okay, I'm just reading through the cases of the Mishnah. The same thing, a woman who braids her hair. Or when her paints her eyes, or she parts her hair, which was some kind of like a hairstyle where they basically parted their hair and kept it and pushed it to the side. Rebbe Eliezer Mechayev. Rebbe Eliezer says for all these actions are considered a desecration of some form of prohibited activity on Shabbos, and therefore, were you to do it unintentionally, you would be liable to bring a carbon chatas, a sin offering. Now, we're not just talking about you're combing your hair. We're talking about now something more complicated than that. But without getting too much into that, Rebbe Eliezer says Mechayev v'chachamim oishrin mishum shvus. The chachamim forbid all these things not as a Torah obligation, but only not as a Torah prohibition, but only as a rabbinic prohibition, because they are not whatever Rebbe Eliezer says they are as actual malachas, actual forms of forbidden labor on Shabbos. The Chachamim say, no, it's not that way, but it's similar enough that the Rabbanan, the sages, decreed that you shouldn't do it. Okay, so now let's go through the examples that we had here. So the first part of the Mishnah talked about taking off nails and pulling out hairs. So what malacha would that fall under? That would fall under the malacha called gozes, shearing. The same way you have wool grows out of the animal, you cannot shear off the wool. So these other things also, the nails, the pulling out the hair, they would also be considered those prohibited acts. When we talk about, now listen to this, this is interesting. When we talk about the hair things, braiding the hair or parting the hair, that again, if you hold that it's a Torah prohibition, what is it going to fall under? Bona, building. It's like the same when you build something, you take material and you make it into something. So she takes her hair and she makes it into a braid or to something. That's called building. Okay. Now, I think I skipped something here. I did. In the cases, you had godeles, which means that she makes a braid. Then it says mekain ha-koicheles. I don't think I translated that before. Koicheles means she paints her eyes. She puts on makeup around her eyes. Okay. What would now, if you were to say that that's some kind of prohibited activity on Shabbos, which one would it be most similar to? No, which malachas of Shabbos would that be similar to? Painting, which would be kosev.
Oh, writing.
Writing.
Course, yeah.
Some would say dyeing, tzeveya.
Yeah.
Okay. And, okay. So according to Rebbe Eliezer, who says you're chayiv, that you're liable for all of these, he holds that every one of these falls under or similar enough that the Torah prohibits them to be done. They're all toiladis. They're all secondary forms of the primary malacha of either geiza, shearing, baina, building, or kaisa, writing. Okay, now the Chachamim say nope, it's forbidden midrabanan according to rabbinic law, but it's not a Torah prohibition. So why is that? So number one, when we're talking about the nails or the hair, where you're not using any kind of a kli, any kind of a cutting utensil or a clipping utensil, then that's called shinui. It's an unusual way of doing it. And therefore, the Chachamim say, if it's unusual, as we mentioned before, that's not going to be the Torah prohibition doesn't apply if you're in an unusual manner. So although Rebbe Eliezer says you're reliable for it, the Chachamim say no, you're not, because at the end of the day, this is not the normal way of doing it. Rebbe Eliezer holds, they bring down here on the bottom from Rashi, it's, I'm not exactly sure what the full point of this is, but let me just read it to you here. Rebbe Lezer holds that one is liable for removing a hair or fingernail without a utensil, such as scissors, because one can perform these actions just as well with one's hands. So, that means to say, it sounds like what he's saying is, at the end of the day, you accomplish, with using a utensil, use your hand, you're accomplishing the same thing anyway. But he's not addressing the issue that it may be unusual. So, not sure exactly what he does with that. Does he hold that even things are unusual, you're still chayav for? Would this, for some reason, be some kind of an exception? That is not explained here. Okay. And when it comes to the other ones, when it comes to, we say that when she braids her hair, it's building. That's not building. That's not called building. Building is something maybe more permanent, more sturdy. That's not building. It's similar to building, but not building. And also, painting her eyes is not writing, right? When you write something, you're writing some kind of something that has a meaning, some kind that has a symbolism, something that has a meaning. There it doesn't. So therefore, again, according to Torah law, it's not a problem, but according to rabbinic law, it is. Okay? And then the Mishnah continues. Now, if you detach something from the ground, something's growing from the ground, you pull it out on Shabbos, that is the malacha of kaitzer, of reaping, of harvesting. Mm-hmm. In this case, this thing is not growing, this plant's not growing in the ground, it's growing in a flower pot. And you're pulling it out of the dirt of the flower pot. So we say like this, if it's from a flower pot that has a hole in it, chayiv, then you'll be liable. That's considered kaitzer. But if it doesn't have a hole, then you're exempt. What does this mean? The rule is like this. Anywhere that there is a hole, at least the size of a small root. Yeah. A hole wide enough for a narrow root to pass through. Okay. If you have a hole large enough for that, which is not a very big hole, no matter where it is, it could be on the bottom or the side of the plant. We say that the plant absorbs nutrition from the ground. The way I understand it from the Baratanura, there's a certain moisture that comes up from the ground. And therefore, if there is a hole in the flower pot, the pot with the plant will be nourishing from that moisture that comes up from the ground. That's if it has a hole. And if it does that, it is halakhically considered attached to the ground. And therefore, if you pull out the plant that's growing in the flower pot, that's like touching it from the ground, and therefore it's a Torah prohibition. We have Torah prohibition of kaitzer, of harvesting. But if it doesn't have a hole, then it's not nourishing from the ground. It's not attached to the ground. It's not attached to the ground, so you're not detaching from the ground. Therefore, patur, you're exempt. Exempt means it's not a Torah prohibition, but it'll be a rabbinic prohibition. Reb Shimon paiter bazeh bazeh. Reb Shimon exempts in both cases. Reb Shimon holds that even where the flower pot has a hole, you not consider it connected to the ground, and therefore you are not transgressing the Torah prohibition of kaitzer, of harvesting. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.